Hey everybody, welcome to the review from Izzy Cinematic Escape on YouTube. Today's review is based off the 2021 horror thriller film Spiral from the Book of Saw. Now, anyone who is familiar with the Saw franchise, let me go ahead and just give a little bit of information here when it comes to the critical reception. When it comes to Saw, there is no in-between when it comes to reception. Either it is a mixed reception or it's a polarizing negative critical review. So you're never going to get anything that's in between, and you're never going to receive a Saw film that has critical acclaim, whether it pertains to the acting or anything of that nature. It's all about the gore, the horror, the intensity, and of course, what the twist is going to be when it comes to the end of the film. Having said that, the first Saw film became a sleeper hit that transformed into a massive massive franchise that essentially revitalized the gore genre and became quite an event. I mean, every single year you had a Saw film come out, and it was still one of the more entertaining franchises that was coming out during those respective years. At one point, Paranormal Activity more or less dethroned Saw at that point, and Saw went on this hiatus, given the fact that they were witnessing a lot of dwindling box office returns. Jigsaw, the 8th film, came out, and it sparked enough interest where you had this sequel come out. Was directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, starring Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson. Now, mind you, when I first heard that Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson was involved in the Saw film, I could not believe it, because when I think of Saw, most definitely I do not associate it with Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson. It's something that I viewed it more as a kind of a alternate universe where you're not exactly sure what you're expecting, given it's hard to take any type of film, or rather a horror film, seriously, especially if you have Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson involved. When I think of a horror film with Samuel L. Jackson and Chris Rock, my mind is more or less going into something that's very over the top, in a sense, like, say, Snakes on a Plane, Anaconda. Nothing that you would expect them to be, something that you would expect them to be associated with, if that makes any sense. So when I first heard that they were involved, I must admit, I was a bit hesitant, because I wasn't exactly sure if I was going to be a fan of the concept of them being involved. Spiral from the Book of Saw, I view it as more of an attempt to create some form of an anthology series. The story is basically, you have the character of Ezekiel Banks, played by Chris Rock, who is a veteran detective who is thrust into this twisted game from Jigsaw, or a Jigsaw copycat killer. In any event, he connects with his estranged father, who's played by Samuel Jackson, the character Marcus Banks, and they are piecing together clues of this Jigsaw killer, this copycat, targeting specific victims, and they're not exactly sure what's going on, and yet Ezekiel Banks finds himself at the forefront of attempting to stop this new threat. In any event, he's also given a new partner in the process of investigating these grisly murders. Now, one of the cool things I really did enjoy about this film is how Darren Lynn Bousman filmed it. The cinematography is quite spectacular, and it's really weird when I think about cinematography in terms of a Saw-related film. It's very dressed down, gritty, brutal, dark, and one of the things I loved about it in general was how it reminded me more of a 70s type detective, noirish type atmosphere, where you have these characters, these officers who were dressed down, very realistic, down to earth, and connected with one another, in a sense that you find yourself wondering who has an ulterior motive. But again, very realistic, so that way, and in that sense, I can't really find any type of fault with how that was portrayed, because I love any type of film that goes into a detective, noirish type concept that allows you to think and explore the possibilities of what could possibly unfold. Having said that, that was one of the beautiful things I liked about it. It reminded me of Zodiac, if that makes any sense. I love Zodiac, and I love the atmosphere of Zodiac. So the fact that it reminded me of that, I knew was something that I was going to thoroughly enjoy. The traps in this film are very simplistic and tragic and beautiful in and of itself. And one of the beautiful elements of this film is the fact that it doesn't necessarily focus so much on the traps the way the past films did. The past films, as I mentioned, was all about the traps, exactly how they were going to top each other. And the thing that made me uncomfortable, it succeeded with, was the fact that the traps were so realistic and tragic and uncomfortable, in the sense that I found myself moving around in my seat and wincing and making that sound effect, given how painful it looked. And of course, when it comes to Saw traps, obviously there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of pain, and the beginning of the film, in actuality, the trap was so mind-blowingly realistic that I was sold when it happened. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. I am sold. You have my attention. I cannot wait to see exactly what's going to unfold. From an acting standpoint, again, it's hard to take any type of film seriously, especially a horror film, if you have Chris Rock and Samuel Jackson involved. And with Saw, there's going to be cheesy acting. There's not going to be anything that's realistic. So you have to find yourself, you have to adjust. And I guess that's the best way to describe Chris Rock and Samuel Jackson being in this film of this magnitude. You have to force yourself to adjust to them being in it because it's not something that you expect them to be in. Chris Rock is more of a deviation from him, as you're expecting him to be the over-the-top goofball as we've become accustomed to when it comes to him being in certain type of films. But he's still a comedic goofball, but at the same time he is serious. And he does manage to play a convincing type character in this film. So I'm not going to knock him because he is deviating from what he's normally known to do. So I did appreciate the fact that he's branching out. Hopefully he does branch out into more dramatic, serious roles. I do believe he has a talent for it. Samuel Jackson is Samuel Jackson, as you'd expect. So I really don't have much to say about him, but I view this more as a vehicle for Chris Rock branching out into more serious, intense roles. Overall, I have to say I did enjoy Spiral from the Book of Saw. I thought it was really good, very entertaining. There were certain things I didn't like about it, not enough to detract me from enjoying it from an overall perspective. I didn't like how they made the overall revelation of who was involved to be as obvious as I was not expecting it to be that obvious. But again, it didn't correlate for me to enjoy it that much less. So I won't knock it too hard for that, but I will take a point off of it just because I felt it could have been a lot less obvious. But it is what it is, and the fact that it did translate into a very twisted, messed up ending still. Again, it's just the ending. The ending of itself is quite more or less a return to what made Saw as far as twisting things are concerned. But at the same time, I just felt they just went into a direction where it wasn't so obvious. It would have made it that much more perfect for me personally. And there's another scene where the music does not correlate with what is known as a Saw film anyways. It's a minor spoiler, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it. The fact that there is a scene where there's a kind of a rap R&B type song at the beginning of the film with the character of Ezekiel Banks. I know they probably did that to associate it with the character, but I just felt that when you think of rap and R&B, it's not something that you would expect to hear in the Saw film. But it's not a very long scene, so don't expect it to be that much more lengthy than what I'm talking about. So it's over and done with it in about a few seconds, so it's not that big of a deal. And you do, once again, towards the end, you hear the iconic Hello Zep theme song. There's a lot of Easter eggs pertaining to past Saw films, and that's what I really enjoyed about it. There's Easter eggs, but there's no type of revelatory mentions of past characters or past events. There is a mention of the Jigsaw killer, obviously, but it's not anything that relatively focuses on him. It's more about the questions of whether or not he's involved or whether or not it's a copycat killer. It's a true standard, a deviation from the traditional Saw franchise. It's more of a crime thriller with horror elements rather than a straight-out gore flick. And I think that's the beautiful nature of this film as well. It is quite different from your standard Saw film. So I have to give Darren Lynn Bousman a thumbs up for attempting a new direction. So I sincerely hope that if this film is successful, we see more of that direction from him, because there is potential there for an anthology series, and I love what he attempted to do with this. So from a cinematic and critical perspective from me, in my opinion, I have to give Spiral from the Book of Saw, I'm gonna give it about a 4 out of 5, because I did enjoy it and I thought it was absolutely fun and entertaining. And the ending, as I mentioned, is quite messed up. So when you watch it, if you do watch it, be prepared for one of the more tragic endings of this film. It's just mind-blowingly sad and tragic at the same time. So that's all I'm going to say about it. I would have to give Spiral the Book of Saw a 4 out of 5. I did enjoy it, a 2 thumbs up. I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Let me know what you thought about the film when you do get a chance to watch it. Provide a like and a comment on my YouTube page and in my Facebook page if you want to. Either way, you'll be hearing from me again, my friends, and I hope you guys continue to remain safe and healthy. Take care, and peace out.